Fight Club didn't arrive in theaters asking to be understood. It arrived demanding to be felt, argued over, and misread on purpose. He was building a trap disguised as liberation, a satire so sharp it cut the audience holding it. Beneath the soap and the basements and the blood lay something stranger, a film that predicted its own misinterpretation, that warned against the very movement it would inspire. And 25 years later, the film still refuses to explain itself. These are 20 hidden details in Fight Club you completely missed. Number 20. The film opens at the end on purpose. The first shot of Fight Club takes place minutes before the final scene. The story is already over when it begins. Everything that follows isn't a progression, it's a reconstruction, a flashback disguised as forward motion. Director David Fincher structured the film this way deliberately, forcing the audience into the same fractured perspective as the narrator. The camera travels backward through the narrator's brain, tracing fear along neural pathways, moving from synapse to gun barrel in one unbroken shot. By the time you reach the end, you realize you've been watching the narrator try to make sense of something that already happened, something he can't fully accept even as he's narrating it. Number 19. The narrator is never given a name. He exists only as a role: employee, consumer, observer, victim. Without a name, he becomes interchangeable with every other man who feels erased by modern life. The film treats him as a placeholder for identity, not as a person. Fincher and writer Jim Uhls made the decision early in development to strip the narrator of any identifying markers beyond his function in society. Even the credits list him only as narrator, played by Edward Norton. The absence of a name forces the audience to project themselves onto him, to see him as a reflection rather than a character. The narrator has no name because he has no self, and Fight Club is the story of what fills that emptiness when no one is looking. Number 18. IKEA catalogs are shot like a fantasy. The camera treats furniture the way movies usually treat desire. Slow movements, glowing light, exaggerated focus. Every piece of Swedish minimalism is filmed like an object of lust. Cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth had previously worked as a camera operator on David Fincher's The Game, where material wealth similarly served as a trap disguised as achievement. The narrator caresses catalogs, arranges his apartment like a showroom, measures his worth in complete dining sets and clever storage solutions. The film never mocks him for it. Instead, it presents his obsession as completely rational within the logic of consumer culture. The apartment becomes a stand-in for identity, a carefully curated collection of objects meant to signal who he is to the world. Number 17. Tyler appears before he exists. Tyler flashes into single frames long before the airplane scene. These subliminal cuts mirror Tyler's later job as a projectionist, inserting pornography into family films. Fincher planted Tyler in 4 separate scenes before his official introduction, standing in the narrator's office, visible for 1/24th of a second, appearing outside a photocopy room, lurking in a doctor's waiting area, and standing behind the narrator during a testicular cancer support group. Tyler exists before the narrator acknowledges him because dissociation doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly, frame by frame, until the split becomes undeniable. The audience sees Tyler before the narrator admits to seeing him, and that gap between perception and acceptance is where the entire film lives. Number 16. The first fight is a test, not an outburst. The parking lot fight isn't rage, it's verification, a controlled experiment disguised as spontaneous violence. Pain becomes proof of existence, a shortcut to feeling real when everything else feels numb. Tyler's request seems absurd at first: hit me as hard as you can, but the logic beneath it is airtight. The punches are ugly, awkward, and inefficient. The scene's raw physicality stands in stark contrast to the choreographed ballet of violence in films like The Matrix, which was released the same year, but treated fighting as art rather than damage. The relief they feel afterward isn't triumph, it's confirmation. They exist, they can still be hurt, and in a world that treats them as disposable functions rather than people, that hurt feels like the only truth left. Number 15. Fight Club meetings mirror support groups. The ritual structure is identical: confession, anonymity, repetition, shared vulnerability in a circle. Only the coping mechanism changes. Violence replaces emotional openness as the path to connection. When he starts Fight Club, he replicates the exact same structure: men gathering in basements, forming circles, confessing their pain, finding catharsis through ritualized behavior. The film's exploration of male support systems anticipated the rise of online communities like Reddit, where strangers gather anonymously to share vulnerabilities they can't express in their daily lives. The men in Fight Club are still seeking community, still desperate to be seen. They've just replaced hugging with hitting, and the film suggests that both versions are symptoms of the same disease: isolation so profound that any connection, even violent connection, feels like salvation. Number 14. Marla is the only character who sees the truth. She never buys the narrator's story. She notices contradictions actions immediately, calling him out for inconsistencies he can't explain. Her presence destabilizes Tyler because she represents reality intruding on fantasy, a witness who refuses to be fooled. Helena Bonham Carter played Marla as perpetually exhausted, a woman too tired to pretend anymore. Her approach drew from the raw, unglamorous performances in films like Sid and Nancy, where Chloe Webb played another woman surviving on the margins without apology. Marla sees him talking to himself, hears him refer to himself in third person, watches him answer phones that aren't ringing, and respond to people who aren't there. Her character doesn't have the energy for delusion. That honesty makes her dangerous to Tyler's existence. Number 13. Tyler's rules are designed to fail. They contradict each other. They escalate too fast. The structure invites collapse. The famous 8 rules of Fight Club sound empowering at first. No shirts, no shoes. Fights go on as long as they have to, but they're actually a recipe for chaos. Rules 3 and 4 directly contradict each other. If someone says stop, the fight is over, but 2 men per fight. Fincher and Ools understood that Tyler's ideology was never meant to work. It was meant to feel good temporarily, to provide the illusion of purpose while actually manufacturing chaos. The paradoxical rules mirror George Orwell's 1984, where contradictions become control. Tyler preaches freedom while demanding absolute obedience. He promises individuality while erasing names. He claims to oppose hierarchy while building a cult with himself at the center. Tyler isn't a revolutionary. He's a virus replicating until the host collapses. Number 12. Project Mayhem removes names on purpose. Members lose individual identity completely. Even the narrator becomes Sir, stripped of the last remnants of personhood. The thing meant to free them becomes authoritarian, recreating the corporate structures it claims to oppose. Fincher shot the Project Mayhem sequences with cold, industrial lighting, making the members look like factory workers on an assembly line. Production designer Alex McDowell created environments that deliberately evoked both fascist aesthetics and corporate uniformity, drawing visual parallels between totalitarian movements and modern workplace culture. The transformation recalls the Stanford prison experiment of 1971, where ordinary people embraced authoritarian roles when given uniforms and anonymous identities, and the members accept it eagerly because they're desperate for belonging, even if that belonging requires erasing themselves. Project Mayhem doesn't corrupt Fight Club, it completes it. Number 11. The house decays as control increases. As Project Mayhem grows, the house on Paper Street becomes filthier. Freedom is visually associated with rot, collapse, biological breakdown. Fincher and McDowell deliberately aged the house throughout production, adding layers of grime, broken furniture, and structural damage as the story progressed. The production team actually cultivated real mold and decay on set, creating an environment so unpleasant that cast and crew needed tetanus shots before filming certain scenes. The approach mirrored Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, where sets were allowed to genuinely deteriorate on camera. By the final act, the house is barely habitable. Holes in the floor, mold on the walls, furniture reduced to debris. The house becomes a physical manifestation of ideology eating itself. Number 10. Tyler never touches anything the narrator doesn't. They're never physically independent in shared spaces. No third party ever interacts with both at once knowingly. Fincher and editor James Haygood spent months in post-production ensuring that Tyler and the narrator never occupy space in ways that would expose the split prematurely. When Tyler pours a drink, the narrator drinks it. When the narrator opens a door, Tyler walks through it. Third parties, Marla, Lou, the mechanic, never address both of them in the same conversation. The precision rivals Brian De Palma's split-screen thrillers, where technique becomes invisible until the reveal. Fincher even shot alternate takes of key scenes, filming Norton alone, performing both sides of conversations, which he later used to maintain continuity in the editing room. The illusion holds because the film respects its own internal logic with surgical precision. Number 9. The narrator's job trains him to accept death. He calculates acceptable loss for corporations. Human lives become statistics, reduced to monetary value in recall formulas. His job as a recall coordinator for a major car company is the foundation of everything that follows. He sits in rooms where executives decide whether fixing a defect costs more than settling wrongful death lawsuits. The recall formula, a times B times C equals X, was actually inspired by real automotive industry practices that came to light in lawsuits during the 1970s, most infamously in cases involving the Ford Pinto. Ralph Nader exposed exactly this corporate calculation in the 1960s. Tyler weaponizes that numbness. If the system already treats people as expendable, then Project Mayhem is simply making that truth visible. Tyler doesn't corrupt him. Tyler just removes the pretense that the violence was ever justified. Number 8. The splice jokes predict the ending. Tyler's inserted frames mirror his insertion into the narrator's life. The audience laughs at manipulation early, finding the projectionist sabotage funny and rebellious, but Fincher is telling the audience exactly what he's doing to them. Tyler has been spliced into the narrator's life the same way intimacy gets spliced into Disney movies. Hidden in plain sight, invisible until you know to look for it. The meta-narrative technique recalls Spike Jonze's later work in Adaptation, where the film's structure mirrors its own thesis about storytelling, and the audience has been spliced into Tyler's perspective, trained to identify with him, to admire his charisma and conviction. The reveal that Tyler is a delusion doesn't just shock the narrator, it shows the viewer. Fincher made you complicit by showing you the trick before he performed it. Number 7. Tyler never exists without an audience. He performs constantly. Every speech is theatrical, delivered with perfect timing and rehearsed cadence. Without witnesses, Tyler has no function. Fincher blocked every Tyler scene with the awareness that Tyler is a performance, not a person. Brad Pitt played him with exaggerated confidence, slightly too polished, slightly too aware of his own charisma. Pitt reportedly based aspects of Tyler's swagger on iconic rebels from earlier films, particularly Marlon Brando's performance in The Wild One, but pushed the mannerisms into near parody. Costume designer Michael Kaplan dressed Tyler in loud prints and leather jackets that screamed for attention, creating a look that felt more like a fantasy of cool than actual style. Tyler is a projection designed to convince others, and the moment he stops being believed, he ceases to exist. Number 6. The narrator learns the truth before he accepts it. Clues stack rapidly near the end. Phone calls where Tyler's voice becomes his own. Hotel clerks who never saw Tyler check in. Flight attendants who watched him talk to himself for hours. Fincher structured the reveal as a gradual accumulation rather than a single twist. The narrator suspects something is wrong long before he admits it. He hears contradictions, notices gaps in his memory, sees people react to him strangely. The technique mirrors the slow burn revelations in The Sixth Sense, which M. Night Shyamalan released the same year, where careful viewers could spot the truth throughout if they knew what to look for. The phone call to Marla is the breaking point. She calls him Tyler, and in that instant, denial becomes impossible, but the acceptance still takes time, plays out over several scenes. Number 5. Tyler dies only when he's no longer useful. The alter ego collapses once the lesson is learned. Violence has served its purpose, delivered the narrator to a point where he can finally see himself clearly. Fincher staged the final confrontation between the narrator and Tyler as a struggle for control, not a fight between separate entities. The narrator doesn't kill Tyler by shooting him. He kills Tyler by accepting him, integrating the fractured pieces of his identity and choosing which parts to keep. The imagery recalls the climactic moments in Taxi Driver, where Travis Bickle's finger gun gesture to his own head suggested both death and transformation. Because his function is complete, the film suggests that alter egos exist to solve problems the conscious mind can't face. And when the problem is solved, or at least acknowledged, the alter ego fades. Number 4. The ending song explains the entire movie. The Pixies' Where Is My Mind wasn't a random needle drop. Fincher held the track back until the final seconds so it wouldn't give anything away too early. The song plays over the final image of the narrator and Marla holding hands while buildings collapse around them. Black Francis, the Pixies' lead singer, wrote the song after a scuba diving trip in the Caribbean where he felt momentarily disoriented underwater, a perfect metaphor for the narrator's mental state. The lyrics describe exactly what just happened: a mind losing track of itself, consciousness drifting away from its anchor, identity dissolving into questions. The song reframes the entire story as a search for a self that was never whole to begin with. Number 3. The final buildings represent debt, not power. The targets aren't government or military installations, they're credit card companies, financial record centers, data storage facilities. Fincher and Ools researched the specific targets Tyler would choose, landing on credit agencies because they represent the purest form of identity as commodity. Your worth is your credit score. Your history is your debt. Tyler believes that destroying those records will liberate people from financial identities they never chose. The concept anticipated the real-world Occupy Wall Street movement by over a decade, where protesters similarly targeted financial institutions as symbols of systemic oppression, and the narrator recognizes this even as he stands holding Marla's hand, watching the plan unfold. He stopped Tyler from dying, but he hasn't stopped Tyler's legacy. The film refuses to tell you whether this is victory or catastrophe. Number 2. The ending rejects explanation. No character explains what comes next. The film refuses moral clarity, declining to judge Tyler's plan or the narrator's choices. Fincher famously battled with studio executives who wanted a clearer ending, something that definitively condemned or endorsed Tyler's philosophy. He refused. Author Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote the novel the film was based on, reportedly preferred Fincher's ambiguous ending to his own book's conclusion, calling it more honest to the story's themes. The final scene offers only ambiguity: buildings falling, hands held, song playing, fade to black. Fight Club isn't a fable with a lesson. It's a provocation designed to force viewers into uncomfortable questions questions about masculinity, capitalism, identity, and violence. Fincher gives you all the pieces, but refuses to assemble them into a coherent message. Number 1, the film is about control, not chaos. Every act of rebellion is carefully structured. Every escape becomes another cage. The real conflict isn't society versus the individual. It's identity versus avoidance. The struggle between facing yourself and constructing elaborate fantasies to avoid that confrontation. Tyler doesn't represent freedom. He represents the ultimate form of control. A personality so rigid it can't tolerate deviation. Fincher built Fight Club as a story about men so desperate for meaning they'll embrace anything that feels powerful, even if that power is imaginary. The film's final revelation is that control was never the answer. Integration is. Accepting the mess and contradiction and pain of being human without needing an ideology or alter ego to make it bearable. Fight Club isn't a story about violence. It's a story about why violence feels necessary when you've been taught that nothing else can make you feel real. Fincher built a film that audiences would misunderstand on purpose, that would inspire the exact movements it was warning against, because that misunderstanding proved the film's thesis. Fight Club remains controversial because it refuses to resolve that tension, refuses to tell you what to think or how to feel. It just shows you the trap and asks if you noticed you were already inside it.